It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and I was sitting on my porch, flipping through a book, sipping iced tea, when I saw Mr. Thompson across the street. He was, as always, tending to his garden, meticulously trimming the hedges around his modest two-bedroom house. Mr. Thompson was quiet, reserved, and polite. A widower in his late 60s who had lived in the neighborhood for over 10 years. He kept to himself mostly, aside from the occasional wave or friendly greeting. We'd all assumed he was just another retiree living off his pension, content with a simple, quiet life. Nothing about Mr. Thompson ever seemed out of the ordinary. But that day, something strange happened. As I watched a sleek black car, the kind that looked out of place in our working-class neighborhood, slowly rolled up in front of Mr. Thompson's house. Two men in expensive-looking suits stepped out, their demeanor tense. They exchanged a few hurried words before one of them knocked on Mr. Thompson's door. I leaned forward, curiosity piqued. Why would these men be visiting him? Mr. Thompson opened the door cautiously, and as soon as he saw them, his face went pale. He quickly glanced around the street as if checking to see if anyone was watching. I ducked behind the porch railing, heart racing. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a casual visit. The men spoke to Mr. Thompson in hushed voices, but from my vantage point, I couldn't make out what they were saying. After a few tense minutes, Mr. Thompson nodded, closed the door behind him, and followed the men toward the car. My eyes widened as I watched him climb into the back seat, the door shutting behind him with a soft, ominous thud. The car sped off, leaving the street as quiet as ever, but my mind was buzzing with questions. I thought about knocking on his door later, but something told me to wait. This felt bigger than just a friendly check-in. Days passed, and I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. Then it happened. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. It wasn't addressed to me, but to Mr. Thompson. The postman had accidentally dropped it in my mailbox. At first, I wasn't going to open it, but my curiosity got the better of me. The return address was from a law firm I'd never heard of, and inside was a formal letter written in legal jargon. But the part that stopped me cold was the signature at the bottom. Harold Thompson, CEO of Hawthorne Industries. Hawthorne Industries. My jaw dropped. I had heard of it, of course. Everyone had. It was one of the largest privately owned companies in the country, rumored to be worth billions. And Harold Thompson, my quiet, unassuming neighbor, was its CEO? Suddenly, it all made sense. The expensive car, the men in suits, the air of secrecy around him. He wasn't just a retiree living off a pension. He was a billionaire, living in our modest little neighborhood, hiding in plain sight. But why? Why would someone like him choose to live here in a simple two-bedroom house when he could afford to live anywhere in the world? My mind raced with theories. Was he running from something, hiding from the world, trying to escape his responsibilities? I had to know. The next day, I saw Mr. Thompson outside again, back to trimming his hedges as if nothing had changed. My heart pounded as I walked over. When he saw me approaching, he gave me the same polite smile he always did. "Afternoon," he said, wiping his hands on his gardening apron. "Mr. Thompson," I started, nervously shifting from foot to foot. I think I got some of your mail by accident." His expression faltered for a brief moment, and I could see a flicker of something, panic maybe? But he quickly recovered, his smile returning. "Ah, that happens sometimes. I hope it wasn't anything too important." I handed him the letter, and he glanced at the envelope before slipping it into his pocket. "Thank you for bringing this to me," he said, his voice calm, but his eyes betrayed him. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Why are you living here?" I blurted out. You're Harold Thompson. You're worth billions, aren't you?" He froze, the carefully constructed mask he'd worn for years finally cracking. For a long moment, he didn't say anything, and I thought he might just walk away. But then, with a heavy sigh, he motioned for me to follow him inside. His house, like everything else about him, was modest, tasteful but unremarkable. We sat at his small kitchen table, and for the first time, I saw the weight he carried. The lines on his face seemed deeper, his shoulders slumped. "I never wanted this life," he said quietly. "The money, the fame, the constant pressure. After my wife passed, I couldn't take it anymore. I had built an empire, but at what cost? I lost her. I lost myself. He looked around the small kitchen, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. This place, it gave me peace. No one here knew who I was. No expectations, no demands. Just a normal man living a normal life. That's all I ever wanted. But why the secrecy? I asked, still struggling to wrap my mind around it. Why not just retire and live openly? He shook his head. It's not that simple. People like me, we don't get to walk away. The world wouldn't leave me alone. Business partners, shareholders, the media, they would have found me eventually. So I disappeared, let them think I was dead or off somewhere, living a life of luxury. But this is my real life. I sat there stunned, the billionaire who had it all, hiding in plain sight, just wanting to be left alone. I didn't know what to say, but one thing was clear. Mr. Thompson wasn't the man I thought he was. He was something far more complicated. As I left his house that day, I couldn't help but feel conflicted. Should I keep his secret, or would the world be better off knowing the truth about the man behind Hawthorne Industries? Either way, one thing was for certain. Nothing in our quiet neighborhood would ever be the same again. The secret was out, but what would I do with it?